It's March 2nd, 2020, and it's time to review 5 of the most outrageous, infuriating, or just plain baffling things that have happened lately. It's your Facepalm 5. Let's count them up. Number 1, Trump administration botches coronavirus response. Because of course it does. Hi everybody, welcome once again to the Facepalm 5. Let's get right down to it. Everybody calm down. Yes, the World Health Organization has declared the coronavirus outbreak a global emergency, and yes, over 3,000 people have died after developing COVID-19, the respiratory illness that is caused by the virus. And yes, 2 deaths have now been reported in the United States, and dozens more cases have been confirmed from across the country. And yes, uncertainty surrounding the outbreak has led to heavy losses in stock markets around the world. But relax, okay? Donald Trump has got this. He and his administration are going to handle this problem with the same level of competence and seriousness we've come to expect from them. On a side note, I do have some bad news. It seems the Trump administration is going to handle the coronavirus outbreak with the same level of competence and seriousness we've come to expect from them. I was serious about one thing, though. There really is no reason to panic, and that is because other people with actual expertise and experience in this sort of thing, are responding to the outbreak. Of course, those mounting that response in this country have to fight against not only the virus itself and the public hysteria it's inciting, but also against the wanton ignorance and misinformation being spread by Trump and his people. Trump's administration has been dangerously ill-prepared to handle an outbreak for the last couple of years. In 2018, Trump fired, reassigned, or asked for the resignation of the entire global health security team on the National Security Council. He also cut funding to the CDC, that's the Centers for Disease Control, forcing it to seriously curtail its international operations, including outbreak prevention programs in China, where the coronavirus outbreak began. It's all good, though, because Trump has requested $2.5 billion in funds from Congress to give to the organizations whose funding he already cut to aid in American coronavirus response. And he's put Vice President and noted virologist Mike Pence in charge of the whole thing. In no way are we doomed. As always happens, Trump is now compounding his ignorance and short-sightedness with his incompetence and recklessness. For the last month, he has repeatedly insisted that the outbreak will just kind of work itself out, telling reporters and crowds of supporters at his rallies that the virus will naturally die off in April when the weather gets warm. The thing is, the researchers and medical professionals currently responding to this outbreak, including those at the CDC who've had their funding slashed by Trump, are saying that we really don't know what effect, if any, the warmer weather will have on coronavirus. Some strains of flu are affected by the changing of the seasons, but COVID-19 is not the flu, something I'm sure senior officials at the CDC are already tired of reminding Trump. Even worse, last week, Trump held a campaign rally in South Carolina and told supporters that the narrative surrounding his administration's incompetent response to the virus is, quote, a hoax, and suggested that concern about the threat of the virus in general is the result of the media whipping people into a panic. Now, I think I've got this all figured out, and it seems like it's just a simple misunderstanding on the part of Trump. See, like I mentioned before, the World Health Organization has declared the COVID-19 outbreak to be a global emergency. The actual designation used by the WHO is Public Health Emergency of International Concern. But that's a mouthful, so it's usually abbreviated, PHEIC. But enunciating all those letters is a drag too, so when it's referred to in speech, PHEIC is usually pronounced as a single word, and that word sounds like fake. Seriously. I'll show you. It says so right here in this Washington Post article. What does a World Health Organization global public health emergency of international concern mean? PHEIC, pronounced fake. See, I wasn't lying to you. Why would I do that? Why would I make that up? So what happened, I think, is that Trump must have heard some World Health official say fake, meaning PHEIC, in the same sentence as coronavirus or COVID-19, and he was like, aha, they admitted it. And then numerous members of his staff spent the next 4 hours trying to explain it to him, at the end of which he grudgingly agreed not to mention this in public, but he still privately believes with absolute conviction that the outbreak is fake and that the WHO even said so. Hence, this is their latest hoax. Either that, or he's a malignant narcissist who doesn't care if people literally die so long as he doesn't have to be personally held accountable in any way. And I don't know, it's kind of a toss-up, really. Number 2, former GOP congressman offered to trade Assange pardon for help with Russia cover-up. So week before last, I saw this juicy headline on Yahoo News. Trump offered Assange pardon if he covered up Russian hack, WikiLeaks founder's lawyer claims. That's quite a headline. And my first thought was, wow, this seems like a big deal. My second thought was, if this is such a big deal, why am I reading about it on Yahoo News? And then my third thought was, wait, why am I reading Yahoo News? As it turns out, other news outlets did carry this story. They just titled their stories a bit less sensationally. No, Trump did not offer WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange a pardon in exchange for helping to cover up Russian interference in the 2016 election. At least there's no evidence for that at this time. It's totally something Trump would do. We just don't have any reason to think he actually did it. What actually happened is this. Dana Rohrabacher, a former Republican member of Congress who lost his seat in 2018 as part of the Blue Wave, met with Julian Assange in 2017 at the Ecuadorian embassy in London and promised Assange a presidential pardon from Trump if he could prove that Russian hackers didn't actually provide WikiLeaks with emails from the Democratic National Convention in 2016, something which the intelligence community unanimously says did happen. So I guess I should phrase it more like Rohrabacher promised Assange a pardon if he could prove that Russians didn't hack the DNC. And while Trump didn't send Rohrabacher or make any promises regarding Assange, the White House was fully informed about Rohrabacher's meeting with Assange and his intentions. Of course, this is all according to Rohrabacher himself, who confirmed his version of the story during an interview with, oh, look at that, Yahoo News again. Boy. Good for you, Yahoo News. I mean, no shit. Wait to rally in the bottom of the ninth. It's like terminal lucidity for a website. Anyway, the Trump administration denies all of this, naturally. White House Press Secretary Stephanie Grisham says Trump, and sing along with me, you all know the words, barely knows Dana Rohrabacher and has never spoken to him on this or almost any subject. Rohrabacher was one of the most prominent Republicans in Congress for 20 years and had at least one documented meeting with Trump in the White House, a meeting that actually made headlines at the time because Rohrabacher is notorious for his support of Russian President Vladimir Putin. So they did at least meet, and I don't know, what do you think they talked about during that meeting? I wonder. I guess we'll never know. Number 3, George Zimmerman sues Warren and Buttigieg over Trayvon Martin tweets. George Zimmerman, who really hates it when people say he murdered Trayvon Martin, is suing Elizabeth Warren and Pete Buttigieg for, and hold on, I must have written this down wrong in my notes. Suing Warren and Buttigieg for not saying he murdered Trayvon Martin. I guess I got that right. So Zimmerman filed suit week before last against Warren, a senator and presidential candidate, and Buttigieg, who was a presidential candidate at the time but has since dropped out, for tweets they posted in memory of Trayvon Martin's birthday on February 5th. That would have been Trayvon Martin's 25th birthday. Warren tweeted, quote, "My heart goes out to Sabrina Fulton and Trayvon's family and friends. He should still be with us today. We need to end gun violence and racism, and we need to build a world where all of our children, especially young black boys, can grow up safe and free." And Buttigieg tweeted, quote, "Trayvon Martin would have been 25 today. How many birthdays have been stolen from us by white supremacy, gun violence, prejudice, and fear? Hashtag Black Lives Matter." Notice how neither of those tweets I just read mentions George Zimmerman. Not willing to let such obscure legal technicalities stop him, Zimmerman is claiming that Warren and Buttigieg defamed and disparaged him by implying that he is a racist responsible for the wrongful death of Trayvon Martin. Where would they get a goofy idea like that? Zimmerman and his lawyer, Larry Klayman, who definitely is not a racist conspiracy theorist with a history of self-serving high-profile nuisance lawsuits, are suing Warren and Buttigieg for $265 million. Remember that episode of Married with Children where Bud gets in a car accident while driving uninsured and the other driver sues and the Bundys countersue for $1 jillion? I don't know. I remember that episode just now. I have no idea why. Anyway, number 4, UC Santa Cruz fires dozens of striking teaching assistants. Last week, the University of California at Santa Cruz fired 54 graduate students who had been working as teaching assistants. The 54 teaching assistants had been on strike since December in an effort to obtain a cost of living increase in their wages. In addition to earning income from the job, graduate students who work as teaching assistants also have their tuition covered. However, on-campus housing is extremely limited, and rental costs in the surrounding area are so high that even with their tuition covered, many grad student teaching assistants have been forced into inadequate or unstable living situations, some even living out of their cars. The strike was what's called a wildcat strike, which means that it wasn't officially sanctioned by the Graduate Student Workers Union, and that union would be the UAW in this case. But the union proposed amending the current teaching assistants contract to include a cost of living increase. The University of California system rejected that proposal and fired the striking grad students. Lori Kletzer, the executive vice chancellor who announced the firings, wrote in an email that despite firing them, she takes the grad students' concerns very seriously, and the university is taking steps to address those concerns by firing them and by starting a temporary housing program and giving grad students a small annual housing supplement, but also by firing them. Over 500 other grad students at UC Santa Cruz have pledged not to accept the jobs from which the striking teachers' assistants were fired, and graduate workers at UC Santa Barbara and UC Davis have begun strikes of their own, and I say good for them. Also, presidential candidate Senator Bernie Sanders has expressed his solidarity with the fired grad students, tweeting, quote, "This is disgraceful. All workers deserve the right to bargain and strike for better wages and benefits. To Janet Napolitano and UCSC, stop this outrageous union busting and negotiate in good faith." And you know what? Good for Bernie Sanders. But I have a question. Why hasn't every other Democratic candidate done the same thing? I'm not a Bernie or bust guy. I like him. I'll happily vote for him in November if he's the nominee. I prefer him over almost every other candidate, but I'm just as tired of overzealous Bernie supporters talking about the guy like he's some kind of once-in-a-millennium messiah who must be elected or all else is irrevocably lost as the rest of you. I don't say this to glorify Bernie while shitting on the other candidates. I say it because as a progressive, as a Democrat, I think supporting unions and supporting workers, even when they strike without the explicit approval of their union, should be bare minimum for all Democrats, especially ones seeking elected office, and most especially ones seeking the highest elected office in the country. The solidarity being shown by other grad students and other graduate workers and Senator Sanders is encouraging, but the silence from others who should be standing alongside them is very disappointing. Well, now it's time for the segment devoted to some of the other things Donald Trump has done recently to disgrace the presidency and embarrass and/or endanger the United States and the rest of the world. It's number 5, the further misadventures of Lord Dampnut. Please keep in mind, as always, the following is not a complete list. He continued to attack Fox News host Neil Cavuto because apparently anything short of absolute slavish fealty is insufficient. This time, Cavuto's offense was having as a guest on his show columnist A.B. Stoddard, who suggested that Mike Bloomberg's poor debate performances might not hurt him as much as people think, since Donald Trump had disastrous debate performances and still won the nomination and the election. Trump, tweeting at the TV again, responded, "Could somebody at Fox News please explain to Trump hater A.B. Stoddard, zero talent, and Team Cavuto that I won every one of my debates from beginning to end?" The next day, still on his bullshit, Trump tweeted again, quote, "So Team Cavuto has very bad ratings on Fox News with his fake guests like A.B. Stoddard and others that still haven't figured it all out. Will he get the same treatment as his friend Shepard Smith, who also suffered from the ratings drought?" You know, I feel like Donald Trump thinking that any Fox News anchor doesn't support him enough is like one of those born-again Christians who think Joel Osteen doesn't talk about Jesus enough. What more do you assholes want? He, the President of the United States, called on Supreme Court Justices Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Sonia Sotomayor to recuse themselves from any cases related to him. Nothing improper at all about that. The president, who has done many crimes, calling on judges who might someday be asked to judge him for his crimes to not do that. Perfectly fine. Definitely not fascist. Who even said that? His presidential campaign announced it is suing the New York Times over an editorial published last year written by Max Frankel, which suggested that there was no need for a formal quid pro quo arrangement between Trump and Vladimir Putin in order for each to be helping the other. You may have noticed that I said this was over an editorial. And that's important because the article in question did not assert as fact that there is some arrangement, formal or informal, between the Trump administration and Putin's government. It merely asserts Frankel's opinion, based on widely reported and accepted facts, that it was in the interests of both Trump's and Putin's administrations for Trump to get elected and for American foreign policy to become friendlier toward Russia as a result. The suit alleges that by publishing the piece, the Times intended to knowingly, quote, misinform and mislead its own readers, which is just hilarious coming from the Trump campaign. First Amendment lawyers cited in a CNN article about the suit say, surprise, surprise, Trump has no case, and this is just another attempt by Trump to intimidate the press into suppressing unfavorable voices. Again, fascism, what the hell you say? And finally, CPAC was this weekend, and of course, Trump gave a speech, and in that speech, he said a lot of things that aren't true, like that he got rid of the estate tax. He didn't. Like that how under his administration, 7 million fewer people are on food stamps. It's actually closer to 5 million, and fewer people on food stamps doesn't necessarily mean more people don't need food stamps, since making food stamps more difficult to access has been a goal of this president since before he was elected. He referred to James Comey as a dirty cop, no evidence of that, and he again promised to protect health coverage for people with pre-existing conditions. His administration and Republicans in Congress have repeatedly put forward proposals that would end guaranteed coverage for pre-existing conditions, all while Trump has continued promising that he's totally not going to do that, you all. Trump ended the speech by going over and hugging the American flag. There's the graphic again. That's Trump at the end of his CPAC speech, hugging the American flag and kissing it and saying that he loved it, and he got such applause for that. The people at CPAC who watched the speech just thought that was great. And that's why Trump did it, because he knows that that's all his shithead supporters want to see. They want empty displays of patriotism from someone who cares about nothing other than himself and his own interests. And they want someone to tell them things that make them feel good about themselves and validate their warped, ignorant view of the world. As long as Trump tells them what they want to hear, they'll believe it, because the fact that it's what they wanted to hear is all the evidence they need that it's true. Well, stay tuned for the post show, everybody, but for now, that's 5. Speak out, act out, resist, look after each other. Okay, hey, welcome back. This is now the post-show segment of the show. So for those of you who don't like watching a long live stream, if you just want to watch the sort of proper Facepalm 5 bit, that part is over. So please feel free to stop watching this, whether you're watching it live or whether you're watching it archived later. You don't have to keep watching if you don't like watching the long videos. But thank you for watching nonetheless. Before I get too far into this, I want to go through some shout-outs for my new Patreon patrons. And their names are scrolling up on your screen right as we speak. These are my newest Patreon patrons at a level of $5 a month or more. That gets you a shout out at the end of the Facepalm 5. And their names are Andrei Krishkovich. Thank you, Andrei. David Appleman. Thank you, David. Laura Plines. Thank you, Laura. Elvis Needs Boats. Thank you, Elvis Needs Boats. Sean Zoltek, thank you, Sean. And Chucky Reynaldo, thank you, Chucky. Thanks to everybody for being my Patreon patron, however long you have been and however much you are pledging. I could not do this without you. Thank you for supporting this channel. Thank you for supporting the Facepalm 5 and for all the other videos I do. Welcome aboard, those of you who just became patrons. So now, let's see what's going on in the live chat. How is everybody? Oh, and the Magic Theater is here. Hi, Magic Theater. Hi, Leto. I see Leto has joined us. John, John Gingras just said in the chat, I'm going to vote for whomever the Democratic nominee ends up being. Cheers to that. So am I. There are certainly people that I would prefer get it and people that I really don't want to get it. But whoever gets it, I'm going to vote for them in November. Because I don't want Donald Trump to be reelected. Yes, Darren, you don't have to watch. You can go. I release you. I release you. I release you. With a heart full of love for the man you once were. That's a Christmas Carol quote that I just wanted to share with you in March, for some reason. Came the dawn. I hope you're not right. Came the dawn says in the chat, it doesn't matter who the Democrats nominate. The GOP voter suppression efforts will prevent any Democrat from winning. I hope that voter turnout will be high enough to counteract that, because that's really the only way to counteract that, is to just for turnout to be high. I really hope that that's not true, but I mean, it could very well be the case, because the voter suppression efforts are of course, are in full gear. Yes, Canada Dry. By the way, I've mentioned this before. I don't drink typical ordinary soda anymore for health reasons, but I have found that flavored sparkling water, flavored seltzer water, is amazing, and I actually like it better than soda. It's a lot lighter. It doesn't feel as heavy and as sugary and syrupy. And Canada Dry lemon lime seltzer water. They don't pay me shit. It's not a sponsored product. I actually drink it. I guzzle can after can of this every day, so I highly recommend it. Hi, Comrade iBot. Hi, Some Random Geek. Yeah, Dinah Cat loves me. I don't. The thing about the Democratic Party that annoys me, I mean, And I know what you're saying when you say it seems determined to make sure Trump is reelected. The Democratic Party, and by which I mean the establishment, the sort of the mainstream structure, the institutional Democratic Party, is so timid and so cowardly and so terrified of embracing real, progressive change, that I think it often seems like they're more interested in giving people Republican light than giving people a true alternative to Republicans, because they have such an inferiority complex that I think the Republicans have convinced the mainstream Democratic Party that Democrats can't win national elections unless Republicans vote for them. And that is such a mind fuck. The Republican Party has successfully gaslit the mainstream Democratic Party. That I think a lot of them actually believe that if they don't get Republicans to vote for their candidates, they can't win national elections. And I think that is horseshit. And not only is it strategically a bad idea, but it holds the party back. It keeps the party from being as progressive and as bold as I think it really, really needs to be, both to win elections and also for the good of the country. Faye Queen Corey, have you left Warren and joined the Bernie cultists? No, as long as Warren is in the race, I intend to vote for her. When she drops out, then I will not join the Bernie cultists, but I will vote for Sanders. If Warren drops out, I will vote for Sanders. He's the only other candidate that I am positively excited about. Any of the like, if Biden gets it, I will vote for Joe Biden in the general election, and I will encourage other people to vote for him as well. But I would prefer that either Sanders or Warren be the nominee. As long as Warren is in the race, I will not. I will vote for her. If she drops out, which looks increasingly likely, if she doesn't do really well on Super Tuesday, then she probably will drop out. And then I will totally vote for Bernie Sanders. But no, I am not a Bernie cultist. Bernie or busters, the really, really like strident, overzealous Bernie Sanders supporters really get on my fucking nerves. I think they make their candidate look bad. I think they make their movement look bad. The base, the Bernie Sanders base, I think they make the whole thing look just incredibly bad. And I'm not sure how large a segment of Bernie's base they are. They are certainly a very vocal segment of Bernie's base, especially online. And they're just so malicious and reactionary and vicious and uncompromising, and they really, really, really get on my fucking nerves. So I am not going to be one of them, but I will vote for Bernie Sanders if Elizabeth Warren drops out. And of course, I will vote for whoever the nominee is in November. Douglas Sharon says, I see the poster behind you, Superman or Batman. Oh, you mean which would I prefer? Like, what's my favorite between the two? My personal history says Batman, because I've devoted a lot more time and attention to Batman over the years, but I think my heart is with Superman. I think as I get older and more sentimental, I'm much more of a Superman guy than a Batman guy, but obviously I love them both. I have a couple of super chats here. Here's one from Twilord. Donor class wants strong reps and weak Dems. So, but yeah, you're absolutely right, I think. And then also here's one from a name that is written in Cyrillic that I can't pronounce. I apologize. But it says, Trump's bad, but I live in Russia and nobody is bothered by stuff going on here. Please do research and share my outrage. World needs to hear it. My understanding is that things in Russia are not great, especially for minority groups, especially for LGBTQ people. I admit I haven't done a lot of research on how bad things are in Russia, so I don't know a lot of details, but I've heard stories and read enough and heard enough from people that I know that things in Russia are not good at all, especially if you are a member of a marginalized group. Comrade Ibot says, assuming the worst and the DNC sabotages the election and Trump wins again, what are your ideas of action? What would you have to see to move closer to a revolutionary left? I mean, I honestly don't know. If Trump gets reelected, I mean that I would probably be closer than I ever have been. I don't know. I honestly can't tell you like a specific thing. There's nothing there's nothing in particular that I'm waiting on. Then I think like, oh, if that happens, I'll take to the streets. I honestly don't know. But if Trump gets reelected, that will not. I mean, I will certainly not be in a very good mood if that happens. Mode select will. Why is the current theory that if Warren drops, she'll endorse Bernie? She has focused so much energy on saying he's splitting the party that it seems unlikely, even considering the other candidates. Well, it's also possible that if Warren drops out, she won't endorse anybody, at least not right away. And truthfully, unfortunately, as I say this as a Warren supporter, if she doesn't do well in Super Tuesday and she doesn't win a lot of delegates or show very well in the various elections, then it probably won't really much matter whether she endorses anyone or not. But I mean, maybe, I guess it's conceivable she might endorse Biden, but I think the money is on her endorsing Bernie if it comes to that, because she and Bernie are very close on policy, and she is a very policy centric candidate. Policy is at the very core of her campaign. And if she is forced to throw in the towel, I think it's reasonable to assume that she would endorse the candidate that is the closest to her proposals and policies, and the candidate that she feels, if he won, would be the most receptive to her ideas and policies. But I don't. Bill says, I just wanted to say that in my 52 years, no other president has damaged my perception of the U.S. than Trump. Yours truly, some old Australian. Well, thank you for sharing that. No, he's the worst president. I'm going to be 40 this year, so you have a few years on me. But he's by far the worst president in my lifetime. 255 AD, are you annoyed? Are you annoyed the uncertainty about Super Tuesday has prevented us from being able to be happy about Pete dropping out? No, I mean, I'm not. Look, I was never going to vote for Pete. He was never a candidate that excited me remotely. But I mean, I'm not like gleeful that he dropped out. I mean, I'm glad that it's not going to be him. I'm glad that he's not going to be the nominee, because I didn't want him to be the nominee. But I'm not like, I don't want to, do a dance that he dropped out. I'm not gleeful over it. So no, that doesn't really bother me. Got another super chat here from the Russian person. Again, I apologize for having no idea how to pronounce your name. Our president is literally in the process of changing the Constitution to stay in power. There are other worrying changes. Just read about that, please. I'm familiar with that. I've heard that story. And yeah, and didn't Putin do that once before? Or he changed the Constitution to allow him to, he altered the term limits provision so that he could basically take a term off and serve as prime minister while someone else served as president, and then come back and serve another couple terms as president. So he's done that already, and it seems like he's in the process of trying to do that again. I mean, look, he's an authoritarian. He's a dictator in everything but in all but name. I mean, it's atrocious. It's despicable, and even if he weren't a dictator, his policies seem terrible, and conditions in Russia seem horrible for people. So I have I have great sympathy for what you're going through. Here's another super chat from Sean Hartley. Thoughts on Ethan Van Sciver's massive ripoff of Space Ghost getting taken down by Warner Brothers, and thoughts on Comicsgate in general. And then there's another super chat here from Steelwolf. Thank you for that. Trump has done more to sour my view of the U.S. than any other president in 50 years. Australians are sick of being pulled into conflict and having our markets tank because of Trump's tantrums with China. I sympathize there. Sorry, Sean. Back to your question. I saw the Space Ghost ripoff comic being taken down for copyright infringement by Warner Brothers, and I saw someone tweeted about it, and I posted a reply as the J. Jonah Jameson laughing animated GIF from I think Spider-Man 2, because I am gleeful about that. I'm not so gleeful about Mayor Pete dropping out, but I'm very gleeful about Comicsgate getting, having things flushed down the toilet, because I think they're assholes. I think they're assholes. They're crybaby assholes, just like Gamergaters. They're crybaby assholes. Let me see. Tommy from the Bronx says, "Do you really think Bernie's healthcare program will work?" Yeah, absolutely. Yes, I think it will work. Here's one from 255 AD. Suppose you had a small child, let's say 8. Would you be honest with them about how terrible Trump is? I'm kind of glad I didn't know how bad Bush was at that age. If they ask me, I would tell them. Yeah, I mean, I probably wouldn't sit my child down and say, you need to know that the president is a piece of shit and here's why, if they didn't ask me about it, or if I didn't feel like they needed to know for their child lives, for their everyday lives as a child. But if they asked me about it, I would be honest. Yeah, I would be honest with them. I wouldn't try to hide it from them. Dave Kaczynski, you say a lot. I do. When I'm off script, when I'm speaking extemporaneously, I do say a lot. It's what's known as a crutch word, and I try to avoid it. And now that you said it, I will try to be a little more conscious of it because you have reminded me. But yes, I do say a lot. Thank you for noticing. Robert Mills says, "Hi, hope you're doing well." I'm doing really good. I hope you're doing well. I'm doing about the same as I was yesterday, because this is my second live stream in a row, 2 days in a row, because yesterday was the special live stream that Jason and I did for the end of the second season of the Ensign's Log, which I believe you were in, Robert, and you said something very mean to Jason, which was hilarious. Thank you for saying that. I said again. Some random geek, do you rewatch your live streams to see the conversation going on in the live chat? You probably don't have the time. No, I don't do that. If I'm not paying attention to the live chat and shit goes on, I just miss that. I don't rewatch to see what I missed in the live chat. Father Prax says, with as polarized as politics are nowadays, do you think the Republicans would even balk if Trump did what he said about the first 2 years not counting and delaying the election? I think a lot of them wouldn't. I think a lot of them would agree with him. And what he's referring to, for anybody who doesn't catch it, is Trump has joked many, many times that he feels like because of the Mueller investigation and the impeachment investigations that really the first 2 years of his presidency shouldn't count. They were stolen from him. So he should get those 2 years added on to his term. And people say, oh, he's just kidding. It's just a joke. But he's also an authoritarian, fascist, aspiring dictator. So, how much of a joke is it really? Yeah, I think if he tried to do that, I'm sure people who still have some lingering shred of faith in the Republican Party for whatever reason would be surprised how many Republicans in Congress would fall in line and go right along with it. I do think some would break ranks at that point, but not as many as some people might think. Well, came the real solution. The real solution to voter suppression is to roll back voter suppressive policies. I mean, the real solution is to elect people who don't favor those policies and then push them to revoke those policies and to institute new policies that make it easier to vote, easier for everybody to vote, not more difficult. So that's the real solution. But before those solutions can be enacted, you have to win those elections. And the best way to deal with that is to encourage high voter turnout. I agree with you that high voter turnout is not the ultimate solution. High voter turnout is the way to win elections despite voter suppression policies being in place. If you win the elections, then the getting rid of those policies and making it easier for everyone to vote ought to be a major priority. I mean, you need to change the laws and change the policies. That's how you fix it, not just by voter turnout. So I don't mean to suggest that. That's true, some random geek. I was this. It's the second live stream that I've hosted. It's my third in 3 days because I was on Social Justice Alchemy, and that was a great time, by the way. And anybody who didn't see me on Social Justice Alchemy should go watch that because we had a great time. Another super chat from our Russian friend. Worst thing about our government is that it's oligarchy. They only want money. A general was arrested. $1 billion found in his apartment. Cash. Good Lord. That's terrible. That's absolutely terrible. I cannot fully express how much sympathy I have for you and for people living under that regime. Seriously, I think it's awful. I wish there was more that I could do. Well, became the dawn. I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that we won't win those elections. I think that high turnout is. I guess I'm not as fatalistic about it as you are. I would encourage, given the fact that those policies are in place in many districts, I would encourage high voter turnout to counteract them. Because I do not want to just take it for granted that we're just going to lose those elections, because then we definitely will. Oh, and I agree. Dems in power now can bring legal action and attack vote suppression. I agree. I really wish that Democrats in power now would do more. And I think we, as the voting public, need to continue to push them to do that especially at the local and state level, and also at the national level. I agree with you that things need to be done now as well. I mean, I think it needs to be attacked on all fronts. I think voter suppression is one of the great political evils in this country. No doubt about it. 255 AD says, do you think in 2024 any Bernie supporters are going to refuse to back him again because he didn't instantly turn the U.S. into Iceland? I think there will probably be some Bernie's, if Bernie gets elected, I think there will probably be some of his supporters that might be disillusioned if he doesn't keep every campaign promise or achieve every goal within the first term. Yeah, some of them, but I think there are others who would continue to support him no matter what, because I do think there is a certain segment of his base that view him as a once in a lifetime, almost messianic figure, and they just will support him no matter what. But yes, people who look to him specifically for reform, or who have somehow got it into their head that he's a revolutionary when he's not, and he's never claimed to be, and none of his policies to me would suggest that, might be disappointed by that. Yeah. Another super chat from our Russian friend. Thank you very much, by the way, for all of these super chats. The weirdest thing about Russia is that it's all manageable. You don't notice the stuff daily. We only survive this because our government is stupid. Yeah. I think that I'm given to understand that is the way life is under a lot of oppressive regimes, that it's not necessarily something that you experience directly every day of your life. You push up against it from time to time. You are forced to confront the limitations that are placed on you. And when you are in that situation, it can be very, very harsh. But day to day, you don't always experience it, which is probably one of the things that allows it to continue, that has people in a situation, in a mindset where they continue to put up with it because they don't have it in their face all the time. It's the same thing that allows for inequalities to continue to exist in this country. To people who don't experience the inequality every day, or sometimes even at all, it doesn't seem like an urgent issue to them. Let me see, who else do we have? Some random geek says, considering the majority of our lives is undemocratic, no workplace democracy, is it understandable that there's a lot of voter apathy? Yeah, yeah, I think it is. I don't. I understand why people would feel like voting isn't worth it, why it doesn't matter. I understand why people would be fed up with the political system and feel like it's not worth participating in. I understand people who don't even view it in political terms, who have just given up hope, who just don't think that things are ever going to get better for them or for people like them or for the country in general or for the world in general. I understand that completely. I understand that completely. There are days when I have to fight against that myself. I mean, I'm generally a pretty optimistic person, but there are days when I really have to push against that mindset. When I do feel like something pulling me down, I do feel the urge to just throw my hands up and go, fuck this, fuck this. You know, none of this makes any difference. Nobody gives a shit about anything that I have to say. It doesn't matter if I vote. It doesn't matter if I contact my representatives. It doesn't matter whose campaign I donate to or what cause I support. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It doesn't make a difference. I could very easily fall into that mindset, and I have to struggle against it sometimes. So I completely understand. I completely understand. I don't think that makes it okay. I don't think that excuses it. But I totally get it. I totally get it. $255 AD says, how is backing Warren in the primary different from voting third party in the general? I'll say this. I haven't really given it a lot of thought because, to be honest, I really, I hope this is not the case, but unless she really has an unexpectedly strong showing for Super Tuesday, I really don't expect Warren to be running by the time my state has its primary. And Maryland's primary is not until the end of April. So sadly, I don't expect Warren to still be running by then. I hope that's not the case, but I think that'll probably be the case unless she really, really pulls one out tomorrow. So, but if she is still running, but Bernie is so far ahead, or is so far ahead of her at least, that Bernie is the only viable alternative to Biden, I do think it's plausible that I may vote for Bernie instead of Sanders, vote for Bernie instead of Elizabeth Warren, even though I personally would prefer Warren because I would rather give my vote to Sanders in the hopes that he would defeat Biden. That's plausible. That's within the realm of possibility, because I do take your point. If it comes down to only two viable candidates for the nomination, and it's either Sanders or Biden, and I vote for Warren, in that situation, I may vote for Sanders, even though I would prefer Warren as a strategic vote, maybe. But like I say, I don't expect to be in that position because unfortunately, I don't expect Warren to still be in the race by then. Red Spiral Ray, do you think Trump has abused any of his children? He's inappropriate with Ivanka, and his temper makes me wonder if he smacked the boys around. I don't want to say that he has. I don't want to assume anything that I don't know, but it would not surprise me. It wouldn't surprise me. Oh, bye, Leto. Thanks for stopping in. You're probably gone already, but good to see you. This name is fake. Says, as someone who thinks Bernie might be the second coming of Christ, I have to ask, have you seen the video of him giving Bernie holy water to a sick woman in Texas and curing her? I have not seen that one. I've seen the one I've seen the most, and it's kind of an old one now. But the one I've seen the most is the one from when the little bird lands on his lectern while he's giving the speech. That's the one that I'm most familiar with. It's like, oh, it's a sign from the heavens. The little bird has alighted on Bernie's stage, and it's like God or Mother Nature or whoever granting its approval to Bernie Sanders. I've seen that one. I haven't seen the Bernie holy water thing. At 255 AD says the other day Eli said he plans to vote for Warren in the primary. This kind of bugged me because he spent the last 3 years laying into Green Party voters. I get it. I get what you're saying. And like I said, if I'm in that situation, I might vote for Sanders strategically. But at the same time, I do think it's a different situation in primaries as opposed to a general election. If the Democratic Party and people who vote Democrat or would potentially vote Democrat are willing to unify around the nominee, even if you have to hold your nose, even if you think that someone else in the primary who didn't win the nomination would have been better, then I really think in most cases, the best thing to do when you're a primary voter is to vote for the candidate that you genuinely believe deserves to win, or that you genuinely think would be the best nominee. So in that situation, voting for Warren, even if you don't think she has a realistic chance of winning, would be completely fine, because even if the nominee ends up being someone less desirable, you are going to vote for them in November no matter what. That's the whole idea. So I wouldn't really, I don't hold people like, if Eli votes for Warren in the primary, even though she no longer has a realistic shot at the nomination, and it looks like it's going to be close between Biden and Sanders, I do not hold that against him in the same way that I would hold against a third party voter voting for the Green Party or some other minor party candidate instead of voting for the Democrat. I don't think they're quite the same situation. They're close, and I see why you would be concerned about that. But in the primary, I don't think it's quite the same thing. Sean Hartley says, who, in your opinion, is a worse option for president? Trump, who bumbles through politics, or Pence, who knows what he's doing? See, I've come to think of it as Trump is the kind of cancer that will kill you in a matter of weeks. Pence is the kind of cancer that will kill you in a matter of years. You don't want to have either one, but would you rather die in a few weeks, or would you rather die in a year or two? That to me is the distinction. Pence is more conventional. Pence is more mainstream. Pence is, yes, more competent, but he is also not nearly as reckless, not nearly as ignorant, not nearly as shamelessly corrupt. I would not vote for Mike Pence if somebody put a gun to my head. I think Mike Pence would be an absolutely horrible president. I think any Republican would be a horrible president, and I would never want to support any of them. But I don't know if Pence would be as urgent of a threat as Trump is. I would love to avoid a Pence presidency no matter what. But even though Pence would be awful, and even though I take your point that Pence knows what he's doing and might be more dangerous in that way, it's hard for me to say that he would be worse than Trump. It's hard for me to say that a more conventional Republican would be worse than Trump. In terms of policy, they wouldn't be all that much different. And clearly the Republican Party supports Trump no matter what he does, and they would presumably continue to support Pence no matter what he does. So that wouldn't change. I don't think I'm not quite on the Trump is bad, but Pence will be worse bandwagon. Mm-hmm. Comrade Ibot says, can you justify, if only to yourself, a defense of the position of president? Yeah, I'm fine with there being a president. I don't have a problem with us having a president or and I mean, I don't have a problem with the idea of an elected head of state. I don't, I mean, I justify it to myself because I feel like on paper, our system of government is about as good as you could get. You know, it's not, obviously it has weaknesses that can be exploited by unscrupulous people, and we've seen that over and over and over and over and over again since the Constitution was enacted. But no, I don't think that that there's a whole lot to gain from getting rid of the position of president. I justify it by saying that I think the position itself is a reasonable position, is a reasonable job to have, and as long as there's a head of state that is democratically elected and is accountable to the people and to a rule of law that is equal and just and fairly carried out, then I don't have a problem with that. Now, obviously, there's a lot of ifs in there, and there's a lot of areas in what I just said where things can go wrong and have gone wrong and are going wrong right now, and have never been right quite in some cases. So I want to acknowledge that, but no, I don't. I'm not someone who says there should not be a president. Period. 255 AD. Now, this is an interesting question. Suppose a foreigner asked you why Bloomberg is better than a Republican. What would you say? I would say that Bloomberg is better than a Republican because presumably as a Democrat, he would be willing to work with Democrats in Congress. And a Democrat, even if it is someone who is a centrist or center-right Democrat, a Democrat that would be willing to sign legislation passed by Democrats in Congress will always be preferable to me than a Republican who would either veto democratically passed legislation or support Republican majorities in Congress if they were present. I will always take a Democrat over a Republican because I would always rather have a Democrat supporting Democratic legislators and a Democrat appointing Supreme Court justices, even if that Democrat is not nearly as progressive as I would like them to be. So that's my answer. Twilord says, outsider hot take, if votes for Warren stop anyone getting 1,991 delegates and then Bloomberg buys the nomination, I don't think it can be argued that Warren voters caused that. Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that would be a Bloomberg issue. Robert Mills, would you run for any office? No, I would not run for any office. I try not to do things that I know would be a huge waste of time because there's no way I would ever win. And I honestly don't think I'm suited to that. I just don't think I am well suited to be a good legislator or a good council member or a good elected official. I don't think that's something that that my skills, such as they are, my meager, mediocre skill set lends itself to that kind of a job. No, I think we need to find far better, smarter, more competent people to serve in our elected offices than me. So no, I would not run, and I would not expect, if I did somehow reach a state delusional enough to run, I would not expect that I would ever win at any level, local, state, national, whatever. So no, I would not run for office. Flora D, did Amy and Pete mention a person that they are backing? I don't think Pete has said anything specific yet, but I don't know if Amy has said, but it's widely expected that she is going to endorse Biden. She may have already. I don't know. Natalie Kirk in the chat says, yeah, Biden. It wouldn't surprise me if Pete endorses Biden too, but I'm not aware of anything from his campaign that says they're going to endorse Biden, but I'm pretty sure that Senator Klobuchar is going to endorse Biden. 255 AD says, suppose someone found video footage of Trump killing a hooker. Do you think that would be enough to get Republicans to impeach him? No, Republicans don't care about sex workers. No. No, Republicans would not impeach Trump over killing a hooker. No. They haven't impeached him over attempting to kill democracy. Why would they impeach him over killing a hooker? At least they pretend to care about democracy. They don't even pretend to care about hookers. Yeah, or a sex worker, a less problematic term. Thank you. Run for milkman. Yeah, I could run for milkman. Dog catcher. I could run for dog catcher. A. Yusuf says, in order to win public office, you have to be a good lawyer who can defend himself. Yeah, and I think I can defend myself pretty good, but I'm certainly not a lawyer. Spike Bolin says, what do you think the response to the coronavirus should be? I think we should be deferring to public health experts and doing whatever. I don't have the expertise to say we should be doing this and this and this. I think whatever we should be talking to people who are in countries where the virus is much more pervasive and the outbreak is much worse than it is here so far, and seeing what they're doing and asking what we can do to support them and help to control it in areas where it has spread a lot more than it has in the United States. And I think we should be our policy should be guided according to what people at the CDC and other public health organizations and medical organizations that have experience with this sort of thing and expertise bring to bear say we need to do. That's what I think. I mean, it's kind of a cop-out answer, but it's the only one I can give. I don't know. I have no expertise. I don't know what we should be doing specifically. So I would say we need to defer to people who do know. James Earl Cash says, if only Trump was diagnosed with coronavirus. If that happened, there would instantly be a majority of Republicans in Congress insisting that it was created in a lab by Democrats and it was part of a plot to assassinate Trump. And don't for a second think I'm kidding. A. Yusuf says, do you think Bernie is the new McGovern? I hope not. I hope if he gets the nomination that he wins. There are some parallels, unfortunately. They're both candidates that if you try to measure the public support that they have, it looks like a good bet that they could win the election, that they could defeat the Republican. And I think I've said this. I said this in my most recent hangout with Patreon patrons, that my biggest concern with Bernie has always been that the support that he appears to have would not materialize on election day. That's what happened last time. That's what happened in 2016 when he was running for the nomination against Hillary Clinton. People say that the DNC sabotaged it or the DNC stole the nomination. What happened was that Bernie lost those primaries and in some cases lost them quite dramatically. Like a lot of those races, a lot of those state primaries versus Hillary Clinton were not close. And the final delegate total was it was not a nail biter. Once Hillary Clinton pulled ahead, she claimed the nomination quite handily. And Bernie had a very respectable showing, nothing to be ashamed of. But it was not the outpouring of grassroots support that his supporters, including myself at the time, were hoping for. So that is an analogy I think you can draw to McGovern. He's a guy who got young people and progressive people super excited. There were tons of people who were super excited and supporting him, and it looked like there might be this wave of support that would sweep McGovern into office against Nixon, and it just didn't happen. And the fear to me would be that the same thing would happen to Bernie Sanders, that everyone who says they would vote for him is not going to vote for him, or that the appeal and the popularity that he seems to have based on activity online and based on opinion polls will not ultimately translate to people actually voting. That he is not actually as popular with the electorate as he appears to be, judged based on the polls and on how people talk about him online. That would be my fear with Bernie, because we've seen something similar to that in the past in the 2016 primary. I'm still going to vote for him. I still think he would be a good nominee. I think he would be a fantastic president, and his policies are things I would wholeheartedly support and hope to see enacted. But if there is a big concern I have about Bernie Sanders, that's it. That his apparent support will not turn out to be actual support. Twilord says, if Sanders looks like he's liable to win the presidency, do you think there's a risk of him being assassinated? I mean, there's always a risk. I don't think there's especially a risk if Sanders is nominated. I don't think there's any reason to worry about him being targeted in particular. But I mean, there's always a risk, and with the right wing extreme in this country being so riled up and so attached to Trump, I think that risk would be increased for whoever the Democratic nominee is, because I think there are certain extremists in the country who would view anyone as a potential threat to Trump as someone who could be a legitimate target for something like that. So I don't think it would matter who it is, but I don't think Bernie in particular would be any more of a target than anybody else. Came the Dawn says, does it seem to you that Trump's daughter Ivanka is being groomed for political office or the presidency in the future? Yes. Yes, it does. It does. And it's ridiculous because she has absolutely no expertise and she's one of the most mediocre, unimpressive people I've ever seen. But yes, I agree with you. I think there are signs that it's certainly that Trump is hoping for that. Yeah. Jordan Joan P. What if Trump ate a baby? That has to get him impeached. I don't think so. I don't think so. Plasma burn death. At least Steve and Stuffy are safe from 2019 NCOV or COVID-19, unless you tie them in. No plans at this time to tie coronavirus into any Steve and Stuffy stories. I have the first 4-episode series that will start at the end of March when the Whirlpool takes a break. I have those all plotted out already. I don't have any of them fully scripted, but I know what each episode is going to be. And at this time, there is no reference to the coronavirus in the Steve and Stuffy episodes. So no plans for that. They will be safe, I think. Sean Hartley says, I'd like to hear your thoughts on flat earthers. Does it surprise you that Trump is not one? You know, now that you mention it, it does kind of surprise me that Trump isn't one. If flat earthers are delusional ignoramuses. Anytime you believe something that we know for a scientific fact is not true, and there are numerous ways you can demonstrate the roundness of the earth without even pointing at photographs that people have taken from Earth orbit or from the moon or in transit from the Earth. Like there's so many ways that we know this isn't true, that you can demonstrate just right down here on Earth with simple visual experiments. That we know that it's not true, folks. We know that the Earth isn't flat. So yeah, it's a completely ignorant, it's a laughable position, and it doesn't deserve to be taken seriously for a second. And if anyone tries to start a serious conversation with you over whether or not the Earth is flat, the only appropriate response is to laugh in their fucking face and end that conversation, because that conversation is going to be a waste of your time. And yes, it does surprise me that Trump is not a flat earther, because he is exactly big enough of a dipshit to believe it. 255 AD says, are you a fan of open borders? Yeah, pretty practically speaking, yeah, I do. I believe in borders in the sense of defining jurisdiction and defining national territory, things like that. But I would be completely okay if national borders were treated in a way similar to how we treat state borders here in the United States, where there are borders that divide jurisdiction, but crossing a border from one state to another is not I mean, nobody even thinks twice about it. And I would be completely okay with something similar for national borders. I'm not a huge fan of keeping people out who want to come in here. I think if people want to come in this country, most people who come here or attempt to come here do not mean us any harm and are not planning on doing anything criminal or anything dangerous. There is, of course, a small number of people who do that and mean for that to happen and have that intention, but I don't think that they are worth shirking our responsibility as a wealthy and powerful nation to help the immigrants and help the refugees of the world. And I don't have a huge problem with open borders. I certainly am not scared by them. Republicans like to use open borders as a scare tactic and say, "Oh, the Democrats want open borders." That doesn't scare me like it scares a lot of people, and like Republicans hope it will scare me. Twilord says, what would happen if the Democrat is assassinated too late in the process to put another Democrat out there? Additionally, what if their VP was offed too? I'm not sure what would happen. I don't even know if we know constitutionally if we have a system in place. I would imagine it might be a process that analogous to what happens when a candidate dies during a congressional election or a senatorial election, where the dead person is kept on the ballot and you essentially vote for a dead person, and then the office is immediately declared vacant and filled through the proper channels, which I suppose in the case of the presidency would be if the assassinated candidates win the election, then that office would be filled according to the constitutional process, which would mean that the Speaker of the House would assume the presidency and then appoint a new vice president, which would then have to be approved by Congress. I guess. I don't know. Maybe that's not how it would happen. I honestly don't know. Raining Lands, does COVID-19 worry you? Not a lot. It does. I'm personally not worried about it. I am a little worried about the impact it would have on other people. I'm worried about how much damage it will do and how bad the pandemic could get. I am not worried that it's going to affect me or kill me. I don't feel that threatened by it personally, but I'm a little worried about how bad it might get. Yeah, of course. I think I'm concerned. Some random geek says, can you justify the existence of the Senate on paper? Isn't that much power in the hands of the few a problem? Isn't it the tyranny of the minority? I don't have a problem with the Senate in theory, and I don't think it's tyranny of the minority. I think the Senate as part of a bicameral legislature, again, on paper is a perfectly good system. I think the Senate, having senators elected by statewide popular vote and 2 senators per state, and then having that balanced by the more democratic body of Congress, where it's more representatives elected by smaller groups of people. I don't really have a problem with that system. And again, I think now I do have a problem with some of the ways in which the Senate is run. Like I would be thrilled if they got rid of the filibuster. I do think the filibuster has become more trouble than it's worth and leads to something akin to tyranny of the minority. I would want to reform that, but I'm not to the point where I think it would be worth just completely getting rid of the Senate. Red Spiral Ray says, I'm of the opinion that coronavirus is a bioweapon made in a lab under the order of the Chinese government. How about you? No, I am not of that opinion. Natalie Kirk, do we know Trump isn't a flat earther? No, I mean, I do think it's more plausible with Trump than it has ever been for any president, probably ever, and certainly in my lifetime. 255 AD says, how many people actually go to TraditioCon? This is a Whirlpool question. I assumed it was for all conservative Christians, but you established it's just for separatist Catholics. That's part of the joke. It is, they don't screen people at the door. I don't think they would kick anybody out if it turned out they weren't a traditionalist Catholic. But the event itself is marketed to traditionalist Catholics. And that's part of the joke is when when the announcer says it's the largest gathering of traditionalist Catholics in northeastern Pennsylvania. That to me, that's the joke, because how many people can that possibly be? So attendance probably isn't all that big. Not a very large number of people, I wouldn't guess. And also, 255 AD says, "Will there ever be Whirlpool Steven Stuffy crossover?" I don't have one planned at the moment. I don't. I'm not ruling it out, possibly, but I don't have anyone. I don't have a specific plan at the moment. Um, Yusef says, "Isn't an open border policy? Doesn't an open border policy hurt minorities since poor immigrants are competing with their jobs?" Well, and that this is an example of why I would like broader reforms. I I would like if we establish a humane social safety net for everybody, so that nobody has to worry about starving and nobody has to worry about living on the street, that we create a floor in the system that is high enough so that people can have a little bit of security just to start with, then I don't think that's as much of an issue of minorities not being able to, minorities and immigrants competing with each other for jobs. If it's less urgent, if it's not a situation of, well, if you don't have a job, then you're going to starve to death, then I don't think that's as much of a problem. And that's another reform that I would love to see. I would love to see us get to a point where we have divorced the ability to survive from the ability to work. Because I think that's, I mean, that's one of the worst things about the way our society is laid out. That people who don't or can't trade their labor for for someone else's profit and for a wage, uh, basically are told, well, you're probably just going to die. You might starve to death. Sorry, there's nothing we can do. I mean, if we fix that, then it's not as much of a problem. Let me see. Andrew Bachhor says opinions on the Expanse. I've never watched it, so I can't say. Um, Our Russian friend says, "Can you explain it to a dumb person, please? Why aren't your elections proportional? How is it justified?" I think a lot of it, and this is not a good justification. This is a shitty justification, but a lot of it is just that's the way it has always been. We have had in virtually every jurisdiction in the United States, from the local elections on straight up to federal elections, it has always been what's called a first past the post system, where you vote not for a party but for individual candidates, and the individual candidate that gets the largest plurality of votes, whether they win a majority of votes or not, wins the office, and that's it. So we don't have proportional representation where the makeup of the assembly of the legislative body is determined by the percentages of people who voted for particular parties in the election, like it is in a parliamentary system, for example. It is the way it is in the United States, because I think a big reason is that it's just always been that way. And most people who live here have never known any other system, and they just assume that's the way it is. And even if they become aware that there are other ways of doing things, they're reluctant to embrace that because they're reluctant to embrace change. So I think a lot of it is just inertia, to be honest. It's not a good reason, but a lot of it is just, that's just the way it's always been. And some random geek points out also, yeah, a lot of our early electoral rules were tied to slavery. And that, yeah, that's something else to keep in mind. The electoral college, which is how we choose the president, is a remnant of that was originally a compromise to placate slaveholding states. And there are a lot of remnants of our electoral system that were initiated within the context of a system where slavery was a legal institution. So that's also something that needs to be considered. Yeah. Here's one from the Turn. Do you like Game of Thrones? Again, I've never watched a single scene of Game of Thrones. And actually, with The Expanse, I can, from what little I know about The Expanse, I might see myself watching that at some point. It seems like I could kind of get into that. I have absolutely no interest whatsoever in watching Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones seems like the most boring show in the world to me. I have never been remotely. If you watch it and liked it, more power to you. I'm not trying to shit on something that you like, but for me personally, I have never felt remotely compelled to watch it. Yeah, and I agree that for our Russian friend Vovacat17, I will call you because that is the portion of your name that I can pronounce. Or yeah, a Vovacat17. The Electoral College is a remnant of this of an era when there were slaves, and that was a concession to slaveholding states. And I actually agree with you. I would prefer that we elect the president just via direct national popular vote. I agree with you, and especially when you find out that the Electoral College that is its origin story, it makes it very difficult to support keeping it around. Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up because I've been going for close to 90 minutes now. And for anybody who asked a question in the live chat that I didn't get around to, as always, I want to just apologize and say if I did miss your question, it was not intentional on my part. I was scrolling up and down through the chat looking for questions, and I'm sure that a couple got past me. So I'm sorry if I missed your question. It was nothing personal. I just see 255 AD posted one real quick. I'll just make this the last one. It says, suppose Obama had tried to install a Supreme Court justice without Senate approval. Would that have been a reasonable response to McConnell's obstructionism? I mean, it would have been reasonable, I think, maybe for him to try, but I don't think he would have gotten away with it. And Republicans probably would have tried to impeach him over that. Whereas if Trump tried that in a democratically controlled Congress, I think the Republicans would back him 100% because they're hypocrites. Yeah. So, okay, now, Michael Albert says, would you not being interested in Game of Thrones be because you were interested in sci-fi than fantasy? Yeah, I'm not remotely interested in high fantasy or anything that smells like high fantasy. I find that to be one of the most boring fictional genres in the world. So, yeah, I guess it is because I'm more interested in sci-fi than fantasy. Yeah. But anyway, so I'm going to turn away from the live chat now. So, I'm sorry that I missed a hello from Norway. Thank you for the hello from Norway. I appreciate it. I am going to wrap this up. As some random geek just reminded me in the chat, we have some friends who are in need of a little financial support, unfortunately, are in some tough situations. And there are charity links in the video description of the video you are watching right now. So please go check out those charity links. Contribute to help those people. These are friends of ours. They're good people. And if you can afford to help them out in any way, any amount, please do so. And if you can't afford it, that's fine. No shame, no worries about that. But maybe consider sharing the links on your social media to help spread the word and help some of our friends out who need a little bit of a helping hand. I also want to remind you of my Patreon link, which is patreon.com/Steve Shives. I gave a shout out to my newest $5 or more per month patrons at the start of the post show. And if you become a patron at $5 a month or more, you get a shout out at the end of the Facepalm 5. Patreon support of any amount is greatly appreciated. I also want to remind you that in addition to the YouTube stuff, I host a couple of podcasts with the great Jason Harding, who I just did a live stream with on this channel yesterday to celebrate the second season ending of The Ensign's Log. We co-host The Ensign's Log, which is a Star Trek themed comedy podcast. And we also co-host Late Seating, which is a movie review podcast. And the most recent episode of Late Seating is our review of Bridget Jones's Diary. And the next review for that is coming up in a couple of weeks will be our review of Transformers, the Michael Bay Transformers, unfortunately not the cartoon version. But so listen to the Let Me Listen podcast, all of them, the shows I'm on and the other shows that Jason does, at letmelistenpodcast.com, and there are also links to those in the description. You can listen on SoundCloud or via RSS using your favorite podcast app. That is it for me, everybody. I will be back on Friday to do another live stream. That will be my Ask Away live stream, where the whole show will be devoted to answering your questions and hanging out with people in the live chat and just having a great old time. So I will see you Friday for a new episode of Ask Away. I hope you enjoyed the Facepalm 5 and the post show. Thank you all so much for watching. Thanks to everybody in the live chat for asking such great questions and having such interesting conversations. I appreciate it. Take care, everybody, and I will see you next time.